Diadi, agus Falchigo di Terra Incogweirdo Mokarjas. Hello and welcome to Terra Incogweirdo, my friends. Well, today we're finally getting around to episode 34, the cryptid portion of the program. I have been promising for a while that I was going to talk to you about my cryptid interactions since I moved into the Oregon coastal range. I moved here in 2015 and I started having interactions 4 years later in December of 2019. I have compiled a document since that time. I've been adding to it, working on it, so I'm going to read you that document, and as you can see I'm going to show you a few pictures. I don't have a whole bunch of photographic evidence just because I feel like it's not very compelling, but you know, stuff's happening in your backyard, you start taking pictures. Okay, so the document is entitled My Forest Family. I am a lifelong psychic, empath, and creative. Over the past decade, my creative outlet has centered around writing poetry, stories, and books, mainly historical fiction based on my past psychic experiences. I studied ancient history in college with an emphasis on Celts, Native Americans, and antediluvian cultures worldwide. Thus, for me, no fiction story is as compelling as one based upon an historic backbone. In the winter of 2019-2020, I was holed up, recovering from a hip replacement surgery, when I stumbled upon the story of Portlock, Alaska, aka Port Graham. If you're not familiar, Portlock is a town on the Kenai Peninsula that was abandoned twice in the 19th century for the stated reason of Bigfoot predation. The native Squatch people call these beings the Nantinak, for which they have a very specific Genesis story that involves a man eating human flesh and then being transformed into a hairy man. Portlock was first abandoned in 1905, but by raising wages and promising armed security, the local cannery was able to draw inhabitants, primarily local natives, back to the town. After 4 more decades of predation and many recorded deaths by Bigfoot, the town was finally abandoned for good in 1945. Get this, guys, within a 72-hour period. That is crazy. Portlock remains abandoned to this day. Well, I was simply stunned by this account. Not the part about Bigfoot. I've always believed about them since I was a little kid and saw, like many of you out there, the legend of Boggy Creek. Plus, I spent the previous decade living in the wilderness of Northern California, very close to the Patterson-Gimlin filming site. And in my newer home of Oregon, I had often felt their presence and had a distinct impression of being watched on the regular. The astounding part of the Portlock story to me was that it was a documented historical record. Amazing. I know of no other such account in recorded history. Thus I became fascinated and began researching for my next story or book, the writing decides the length, about Portlock and the Nantinak, which, by the way, to date I have not written. I got sidetracked with other things, and I've been falling down this huge Sasquatch-sized rabbit hole for years now, and sort of takes your mind to other places. Suffice it to say that at the time, I had absolutely no idea of the scope of the Sasquatch-sized rabbit hole into which I was about to stumble. I was once again stunned by the sheer volume of first-hand accounts available online. After establishing the timeline of Portlock's abandonment and cleaning up some timeline discrepancies, it's a little messed up out there in the interwebical world, so had to do some digging and look at some old newspaper reports to kind of straighten things out. I fired up my long dormant psychic muscles to fill in the blanks for the purposes of my story. Is my supposition that these beings were simply defending their territory from systematic human buggery, disrespect, and abuse. Okay, so after a few days of meditation, a wealth of information began to flood into my brain in the form of uploaded blobs. Now, this is not like the telepathic conveyances of a word-by-word story, but this is when vast amounts of information are being downloaded into your brain in huge visual chunks. Up to that point, I had been forcefully maintaining a protective shield around my psychic field to block the incessant stream of unending human atrocities from entering into and thus polluting my spiritual being. Therefore, it took me a few days to realize that this information was being fed to me by a forest person living within close proximity to my home, which lies within hundreds of thousands of acres of national park land and Bureau of Land Management forestry land here in the Oregon Coastal Range. I was receiving information showing me routes to travel along local logging roads that would lead me to areas of their habitation. I received 4 distinct sets of directions, and even though I was still psychically impaired, physically impaired from my operation, I simply could not control my curiosity. And finally, on Mother's Day, in 2021, I had my husband take me out and drive along one of these routes. All the way during this drive, my forest friend was chattering away at me, in my head, and I am 99.9% sure that he was at the time an adolescent male. This would have been 2020. He was an adolescent male. He was telepathically saying, "Not here, a little further, not here, a little further." When we came to an intersection of 5 logging roads adjacent to a line of high-tension power lines, I felt very strongly drawn to the west. This road would lead me along the ridge line on the mountain directly across from my house, which is one of the locations from which I had previously felt watched. So idling in our car there at the crossroads, really suddenly and very forcefully, the psychic transmission with my male teenage forest friend was shut down, and it felt in my brain like it got stomped. It was just the weirdest feeling, I received a thought blob showing me Father Sasquatch chastising his younger son for communicating with a human without permission. Big no-no, apparently. The shutdown was rather comical, but also humbling in its intensity. It was very intense, and it's kind of hard to describe how abruptly and harshly it was shut down. I decided I was not wanted, and I chose not to follow the road, even though I was certain that I would find signs in that direction. So the following 2 to 4 days thereafter, I became more and more curious about traveling to one of the other locales previously transmitted to me. These locations lay in the opposite direction of our initial foray. Even though I had never been up there, in my mind I knew exactly where to go, and I considered going it alone. Now remember, I was recovering from a hip surgery, and I couldn't even walk at this point unassisted without... I may have graduated from the walker to a cane at this point, but, I couldn't get around unassisted. However, cooler minds prevailed, thank God, and my thoughts returned obsessively to those logging roads I had just traveled to with my husband a few days prior. On a sleepless night, a few days later, at about 3 o'clock in the morning, I could no longer contain myself, and I was determined to set out the very next day. But after I fell asleep, I had a very portentous dream. It was intense. In my dream, I was walking more rightly. I was hobbling along this dirt logging road across a valley the valley that was so intently drawing me in. As per usual, in my area, massive Douglas firs and cedars were everywhere, and along the road to my right was a high line of brambles, Oregon marionberries. Their thorny stems can get as thick as a human wrist. Quite suddenly, the brambles started to shake, and about 20 feet ahead of me, a full-grown male forest person leapt over the 10-foot-high bramble patch in a single bound. It's a bird, it's a plane, it's a righteously pissed off, full-grown male Sasquatch. I halted, absolutely frozen in fear. Remember, people, this is a dream. Now, Papa Squatch had apparently been rummaging around my head, for he had extracted one feature regarding his kind that most truly terrifies me. He landed on the dirt road ahead of me, not just on all fours, but on his fingers and his toes. I don't know if you guys know that they can do this. They can actually move very quickly on their fingers and their toes, and their joints aren't the same as ours, so when they do it, their arms and their legs go up behind them, and apparently they look like spiders. Oh, God, it just freaks me out. Oh, sorry, but the thought of 1,000+ pound creature coming at me like a spider is just too much for my tepid psyche to endure. So he commenced to creepy crawl in my direction, and then halted a mere 10 feet from me and huffed so loudly that it shook my skeleton and blew the hair back from my face. Yet still, I was so absorbed, so fascinated by his existence, that I did not retreat. This is when he charged me, sort of askew as a bear would run, with his silky black-tipped chestnut hair flowing gloriously out behind him. I was weird. In the dream, he was so clear, and he looked so well-groomed. Like, his hair was shiny and beautiful. It was, I have heard descriptions of forest people looking like this, not all natty and gross and dreaded up, but very clean, with very clean, shiny hair. Only when the entire scope of my vision was overtaken by the sight of his massive, wide-open mouth bearing enormous, square, peg-shaped teeth did I jolt out of the dream. So the next day, well, let's just say, having been read the riot act, I prudently decided not to go out to that logging trail. Yet, as an empath, I was very sad unto mourning. I felt rejected. It was weird how sad it made me. It crushed my heart to be turned away at all, let alone in such an aggressive manner. I admit I cried a little and spent much of the day gazing up at the mountain across from my home toward the location of the logging road. A few days later, after my mind and my heart had cleared, I received a staggeringly loud vocal transmission from none other than Papa Squatch. It was funny. I was walking around the house, and it was so loud. I sort of fell sideways when it came in. I had to catch myself so I didn't fall over. Papa Squatch said, "Silly girl, they were after you and would have possessed your human soul had you gone that way." What? And after rupturing my inner ear, sorry, kidding, he sent me an inundation of love so vast and overpowering that I started to cry again, but this time in joy. I very rarely had that. I mean, it felt like somebody dumped a bucket of love over my head. Papa Squatch had just saved me from the demons of the wilderness, his term. I was humbled, I was grateful, and for the first time since moving to this place over 6 years ago, I felt safe. I realize now that Papa Squatch and his family have been watching us and protecting our property from the very first day we set foot on this mountainside. Not too long after the psychic slap upside the head from Papa Squatch, my husband, who's open-minded, but he's in no way as psychically wide open as myself, he also expressed a feeling of being protected. Now, this is just so very interesting because I didn't bring this up. I didn't tell him this, so it's kind of crazy that he brought it up like a few days later. He said he didn't really understand it, but something had changed, and he no longer felt anxious about living in a place so close to nefarious drug manufacturers. I mentioned this before. This area is remote and gorgeous, but it is unfortunately a swarm with meth cooks. Boo. It's not good for you, people. Don't do drugs, especially not meth. Since that day, I have been regularly interacting with my forest friends. Okay, this was like a first-hand account. I wrote this part of it. I would have been writing probably at the end of 2021. The adolescent male, okay, this happened that whole summer. The adolescent male knocks on our house at twilight in a pattern of 3 nights on and 3 nights off and 3 nights on, etc., to say, come on out and play. Okay, he did it for 7 months, about 7 or 8 months. Okay. So I would go outside, and sometimes I would play guitar and sing to them or read poetry by my favorite poet, Hafiz al-Shirazi. And I would just talk to them about regular stuff. I left them crystal constructions and baked goods and peanut butter on a gifting table. They never touched the food, nor did any other critter, which is astounding considering we regularly see deer, coyote, cougars, elks, bears, civet cats, fisher cats. As you know from watching my short, we are overrun with chipmunks. There's any number of animals that should have been eating that food, but none of it was ever touched. Not a nibble. It's so weird. Yet they have, from time to time, rearranged. I used to leave crystals out for them on a table, and they would rearrange them occasionally. Actually, I have a photo here of that. I may as well. Oh no, where did it get? Oh, poo. Didn't get added to this album. I tried to add a bunch of stuff to this album, and it just didn't take for some reason. Okay. Eventually, I switched from crystals to Scrabble tiles to amazing results. I have pictures of that, but I've chosen not to share them because the forest people were writing their names for me with the Scrabble tiles, and I'm very superstitious about sharing names, especially when I haven't been directly told that I can. So I feel like it was a great honor that I've been given their names, and I don't wish to disrespect these people by giving out their names when they haven't explicitly told me that I can. Okay. The young male left me a turkey feather in a place that only a bipedal person could access inside our 8-foot tall deer fencing. Okay, this was on a day when I was at home by myself. The only access to this area inside of this, okay, the deer fencing comes off of our house on both sides. Okay, so the front of our house is completely enclosed by this deer fencing, and he left me this feather on my deck, okay? And so the only way he could have got there was to go through the house, over the 8-foot tall fence, through one of the locked gates, or over the roof. And this was definitely his preferred method of accessing me and our yard. He was on the roof a lot. Sometimes I heard them speaking to each other in my house at night when they would come in response to my plea to help heal my ancient ailing wolf dog. This was when my beautiful dog Owyssa was still alive, and I would pray to them to come into the house and heal her. When in healing mode, they appear as orange orbs. One night, the teenage male who first contacted me shook my bed at 5-minute intervals for about 3 hours straight. I know it was him because I could hear him giggling in my head, and I could see his blue orb at the foot of my bed. Okay, so this is speaking like as this was happening. So this would have been 2021. Last night I went out, as I now do every evening, to say goodnight to them. The moon was stupendous, and so I snapped some photos of the moon and was calling out to them, saying, "Yo, all night party people, enjoy this glorious night under the magnificent moon, and if you would be so kind to send me some visual signs to let me know that you're really there and that I'm not the crazy lady of the mountainside." After coming inside and before retiring for bed, I looked over the photos I had taken and I burst out laughing. My teenage forest friend in his blue orb form was in every photo, dancing around my lawn next to the 200-foot pines. And in the last photo I took, the blue orb shots like straight up in the air. It raises above the lines of the mountain behind myself, as if to say, "Yo, lady, here I am, but yeah, can't help you much with that crazy lady of the mountain thing." So, I'm also not showing you pictures of orbs. I'm not, you know what, people, I'm not here to convince you of anything. In fact, my message is a little different, and you'll find that out as we get to the end of this document. My thoughts on this subject have come around full circle. Like everyone else, I was fascinated, and then I got over my fascination and became comfortable with the fact that these are real beings. And now I have a different concern, and we will get to that. Okay, this is just another dream I had about meeting a Bigfoot in New Zealand. That would be awesome. Love it if that came true. Okay, here we go. 2025 update. Okay, so this is what's happened between 2022 and 2025. My forest family up and left the vicinity of my home after Papa Squatch felt his adolescent son had become too fixated on me. Unbeknownst to myself, all that house banging was not just saying hi, but more in the nature of actual courtship. Papa explained, I got a psychic transmission from him right before they left. Papa explained he had to take his son away to find a suitable mate, as it surely was not me. I can't believe I'm crying, but I miss them. I miss them so much. I want to say their names, but I don't want to say their names. I just hope that my buddy, my friend, I hope he found a good mate. And I hope they're happy where they're living now. I'm sorry, I don't know why I'm crying. I'm such an Incogweirdo, what can I say? Wow. They left in the fall, And that winter, my husband and I made this staggeringly stupid mistake of finally traveling up that timber road that Papa Squatch had previously warned against. At a certain point in the drive, we both became extremely uncomfortable and turned around, but not before the thing that Papa Squatch had warned us about, this demon of the wilderness. It freaking followed us home, people. Followed us home. And we felt it too. As we were coming home, we could feel it. We could feel it like running in the woods just outside, like our field of it. You could kind of see the movement, but man, could you feel this thing. It was scary as hell. It appeared to each of us separately and in a different manner at approximately 3 a.m. on nights plagued by insomnia. This is pretty normal for me, not so much for my husband, but I'm up in the middle of the night almost every night. We did not realize we had both experienced the thing until about a week after the sightings. We compared notes and found that we both experienced it being in the same spot, which was the downward slope below our medicine wheel at the center of our property. My husband said he did not really see it more than a large dark shape standing below the medicine wheel that seemed upright and on two legs. He also said that he had the impression that it had antlers on its head. Okay, so I myself saw it after him. He had not told me yet of his experience when I saw it. I think I saw it 2 or 3 days after him. I saw it as a huge black figure on two legs pacing restlessly back and forth below our medicine wheel. As it turned its head to the side, I registered that it had what appeared to be the head of an elk. It wasn't a deer, it was too big. The head of an elk, and it wasn't a moose because it didn't have a moose nose. It was an elk's head supporting an enormous rack of antlers. Like the rack of antlers themselves had to be 4 feet tall. It was just ridiculous, scary. Oh God, it's just all the hairs standing up on my body. I had the distinct impression that it was frustrated, being blocked by the protective energy from our medicine wheel. Here was Papa Squatch's demon of the wilderness, and I was so feckless. I had brought it to our home, even after being vigorously warned off by Papa. Luckily for us, the power of our medicine wheel and all the prayers we generated at that spot held it back and blocked it from entering our house. I am positive that's what kept it from coming up and menacing us directly. It could not get past our medicine wheel. A year or so later, after recounting this story to a local First Nations medicine person, I was told that the creature was likely a Wendigo. Oh, God. And we should consider ourselves lucky to have escaped its notice unharmed. That was a terrible winter full of fear and despair. Many terrible things happened just outside the borders of our property. 2 of our neighbors living directly next to us were murdered in cold blood in the middle of the day, leaving their 3 children orphaned, and I nearly died of pneumonia that winter, among other calamities. It was a bleak season. That winter. Okay, so when I first got contacted by the forest people in my area, I reached out to the BFRO, the Bigfoot Research Organization, and although they were polite, it was very clear that they did not want to touch me with a 10-foot hairy pole because I was talking about psychic interaction with these beings, and they don't want to hear about that. They're not interested in the mind, in the psychic clairaudience, clairvoyance. They're not interested in orbs. They don't want to hear that you can interact with Bigfoot in that way. However, to their credit, they were very polite, and they referred me to a person who was closely in touch with Dr. Matthew Johnson, and his story is well documented. He had a Bigfoot sighting down at the Oregon Caves near Grants Pass, Oregon, and you can just look him up, Dr. Matthew Johnson. He's got his own lifetime experience with these forest people, and he has had a very profound, he's different experience. He started out with the BFRO after his sightings, but he started having the mind speak and the orbs, and then he started to have a very intense relationship with the specific forest person individual, kind of, like I did, but his is very different. So you check out Dr. Johnson for yourself, but Dr. Johnson is pretty much saying that there's two kinds of Bigfoot. There are this specific kind that he's been in contact with that have their whole own genesis story, and that there are other kinds that are very dangerous and predative. So in the beginning of my experience, I was dealing with the very friendly Bigfoot people. There are several tribes of Bigfoot people who are very friendly with humans and who have historically interacted with First Nations people all over the world, okay? It's not just First Nations people in North and South America, but Aboriginal populations across the world report interaction with these people, knowing them, communicating with them historically for thousands and thousands of years. Okay, so at first my interactions were very positive, but after Papa Squatch and my adolescent friend left, and then we brought the Wendigo to the property, it was like all bets were off, and then things got really scary. Okay, so during that winter, because I was so afraid, I got in touch with Fred Roll from subarctic Alaska, Sasquatch, to try to get some advice on, how to defend and or protect myself. So I went from feeling incredibly safe in the presence of these beings, and then they were gone, and I felt like I didn't know if there were aggressive Bigfoot people around me, but we had this experience with the Wendigo, and that whole winter was just a season of anxiety and fear. It was just horrible. So the following summer, after that terrible winter, I attended a camp in Washington State, hosted by Dr. Matthew Johnson and his wife Cynthia. Their own Bigfoot journey is well documented. Sorry, I'm just reading, so now I'm just going to repeat what I just said off the top of my head. Their own Bigfoot journey is well documented in Dr. Johnson's books. I would definitely recommend reading those, available at janue.com, and that is spelled XANUE.com, and I will link to that down in the description. I experienced a healing during that weekend that I can only compare to a similar experience I had had a decade earlier after being blessed with a psychic relic. I keep saying psychic. After being blessed with a physical relic of the Buddha. I don't know if any of you have ever had that before, but they touched my head with a relic of the Buddha, and I started to weep like uncontrollably, like every pain and every bad thing that ever happened to me just started pouring out of me like I was sweating it out. And the same thing happened to me at Dr. Johnson's and Cynthia's property. I was in the presence of the matriarch and the patriarch of this this clan, Janu, they call themselves the Janu people, and the female, it felt like she put her hand inside my chest and touched my heart. And when she touched my heart, it felt like there was that it was encapsulated in it was like a wound that was, my whole heart was encapsulated in the pus and the infection from this wound. And I felt her hand go into my chest, and she touched my heart, and the wound broke open, and all of this pain and pent-up trauma from my youth just came pouring out. And God, it was rough, because I just started wailing in front of all of these people. But it was an insane blessing, just like being blessed with the Buddha. I have no other comparison. It was an amazing experience. So at that camp, Dr. Johnson informed me that 2 families of forest people had volunteered to come and live by my location. Thank God, because I still was feeling weird around my property ever since Papa and his son and his family left. These 2 new families arrived within a week of my return from camp and made immediate contact with me via telepathy first, and later with Scrabble tiles. That's the picture I took out. The matriarch left me her name and Scrabble tiles, and I just didn't feel right about sharing it. A matriarch of one of the 2 families gave birth to a female child on our property within a month of arriving. I know this because we heard the baby crying right after she was born, but never after that. Her mother was my primary contact, and she told me the name and sex of the baby telepathically. Something else interesting to note is that for about 2 weeks after the birth, in late November, my husband and I were knocked over by the smell of flowers whenever we passed the birthing area. She made a huge lean-to using a downed tree on a slope, and it was like completely protected. It was really cool. That same First Nations medicine person who put a name to the demon of the wilderness told me that female forest people emit the smell of flowers when they menstruate. Isn't that nice? I wish we humans did. Instead of smelling like fish. Which is why we were smelling it. We were smelling that smell after the birth of the baby. These families moved further afield after the baby was old enough. So the first family lived like right here on my property that whole winter. The second family, I got their names, but I never really had any interaction with them that I know of anyway. I'm pretty sure that once they moved, they left me a turkey feather, and I think I talk about this. Yeah, I talk about this here. One of the 2 families have established themselves themselves in an area away from my house in which I regularly hike. They also left me a turkey feather in a very noticeable spot on my back trail one day. It was very noticeable because I'm the only person who takes this little diversion of the trail, and it was like right in the middle of the trail, and it wasn't there when I came out, and it wasn't turkey season, and we saw no turkeys, and so it was just a little too pointed. That's how when they gift you a turkey feather, it's weird like that. You're like, oh, wait a minute. How could this possibly have gotten here in that quick of a time? Or like with the other one, like how could it even gotten here? Like, what, did an eagle fly over my house with a turkey in its claws and it dropped one feather that just happened to land right where I walk back and forth? No, I don't think so. So anyway, back to the story. and the other family moved beyond the territories of the local breeding cougar and coyote pack. We have them on the mountains to the west of us, and thus I dare not hike to where they dwell. I can't hike through those areas. My First Nations medicine person friend tells me that they will often give turkey feathers to healers. When I responded that I am a Reiki master, my friend laughed and said, well, of course, they always know. I don't know how they know, but they always know. Okay, so I keep referring to my First Nations medicine person friend. Her name is Owyssa, and she has an amazing channel about the forest people on YouTube, and it's called Northwest Pacific Tracker. So NW Northwest NW Pacific Tracker. I would 100% recommend you check her out, because she is giving you information that you are not going to get anywhere else, people. Not anywhere else, okay? So this information comes from one of her many videos, and these are the tribal names of some of the forest people that we would call Bigfoot people here in the Pacific Northwest. These first four are friendly to humans. They are the Yeren, the Guanch, the Omah, and the Skookum. Okay? These next few are not so friendly. The Gugwe, the sun-faced people, the red-bone people, and wood boogers and mountain boogers. I'm a little confused, and Owyssa will have to clear this up. I think wood boogers and mountain boogers might be also another name for Gugwe. Gugwe are very dark. They're black haired, and they look a bit more like gorillas. The Yeren, Guanch, Omah, and Skookum, they look more like humans, like hairy humans, right? But the Gugwe apparently look more apish, more like a gorilla. The sun-faced people and the red-bone people apparently have this reddish tone to their skin because they eat a lot of food that it contains keratin, so like crawfish and things like that. But those two tribes, my understanding is they live up in the high desert. So on the Pacific coast of America, you have the coast, and then you have a valley. Like here it's called the Willamette Valley, and it's called the Central Valley down in California. And then you have the Sierra Nevadas, and then you have high desert, okay? So that high desert goes all the way from Washington State down through Oregon, through California, and into the areas where you normally think of the desert, like Arizona, New Mexico, and Utah. This is all part of the same habitat, this high desert habitat, and that's where the sun-faced people and the red-bone people live. And apparently they are human. They are cannibals. They eat us. They eat people. So you have to be very, if you run into a Bigfoot that has skin that looks red, you should definitely be concerned and try to get the hell away from there. But the other ones, like the Yeren, the Guanch, the Omah, and the Skookum, they are the kind that are friendly. And in fact, you may not know this, but tribes like the Omah were originally listed on the Iroquois tribal roll call of all tribal nations. And a wonderful MF Andrew Jackson, oh boy, do I not enjoy that man. He had them struck. He had all the hairy people struck from the tribal roll calls because they were big and they were hairy and they didn't look like humans, even though they were, before Whitey showed up in North America, they were all considered just other Native American tribes. All of these people I'm talking about have been known by the Native people who have lived on this continent for thousands of years, and it's just, this video isn't about does Bigfoot exist. It's not a flipping question anymore, people, okay? Are we not over it by now? Are we not done with the supposition they exist? Not only do they exist, but they're being marginalized. And this brings us to current day, and a conversation I had with Owyssa from Northwest Pacific Tracker 2 weeks ago. My First Nation medicine person friend, Owyssa, recently related to me an instance when governmental officials followed Owyssa to one of their meeting places with a forest person. After Owyssa had left, this official shot the forest person through the heart and lungs. According to Owyssa, it took that poor harmless soul 3 days to die. Okay, so this is what's happening to these people, right? This is the reality that these tribes of human peoples have endured since Andrew Jackson stripped their names from the list of First Nation tribes, because these people are often gigantic in stature and covered with hair. By the way, it's been more than once discussed and shown that when humans go to live on the land, they often grow hair all over their body. So it's possible that growing hair all over your body as a Homo sapien or human being is a vestigial response to environmental survival struggles. They are still people, but have differing combinations of DNA from ancestors including Homo sapiens, Denisovan, Neanderthal, and more. There was a genome project that has been running for over 20 years now, where they've been sequencing the DNA of verifiable samples from Sasquatch, and that is where that information comes from. They do not necessarily look like us, but they are people with language, laws, culture, and society, and make no mistake about it. From the time of the Native American disenfranchisement, these forest people have been and continue to be systematically hunted down with an eye towards enslavement and or eradication. And the great big smear campaign regarding their existence makes genocide so much easier now, doesn't it? My final thoughts on the matter are dire. I sometimes wish we could go back to the time when these forest peoples were seen as a myth, for surely they were safer in our ignorance. If you ever see or meet these people while you are out there in their habitat, please recognize you are in their territory. Should they behave aggressively towards you, they have excellent historical cause to distrust all of us. Forget where you saw them, and at all costs, do not lead others to their habitat. I'm going to finish with this, people. 14% of the total habitable lands on this planet is given over to human populations. The remaining 86% belong to the forest people. They do not want us in their backyards. So why don't we just leave it to them? Okay, so I guess my message is Bigfoot is real. There's no question about it. But maybe it would be best for them if they could go back into being a myth and we could all just forget about them In fact, I'm sure that would be what would be best for them. All right, let me show you a couple pictures here. This here is a bear print for reference. Okay, and how can you tell? You see this right here? This is the back. This is the back of the bear paw, and they're not toe prints, but there's claw marks there, and there's like one there, and I think the dirt fell over it. But that's just that's for reference. Okay. All right. That's another, this one right here, that's another bear print. Okay, this right here is all over this area. As you can see, there's like, well, this one's really clear, this little teepee structure, but you see all these sticks leaning up against trees back here. This was a very small toddler in the tribe that lived around my house, and she would regularly do this. She would put her little sticks all over the place. Now, I really wish I had gotten a better picture of this, but you have to understand that I'm pretty sure that somebody was in it at the time. It was being lived in. I don't know, maybe if you zoom in. My friend Owyssa has said that she could see faces, but I don't see them. But it's really hard to see. And again, I wish I could have gotten better pictures, but I would have had to climb over a bramble patch to get to this. But what you're looking at, is a cornucopia nest. Okay, so this nest was made out of like old brambles and sticks, and it looks like a cornucopia basket, so bigger at the top and then getting smaller into a point at the end. And then there was, it was about maybe 8 feet tall, and it had a hole opening about 4 feet off of the ground. Now, bears and cougars make nests like this, but this was really huge, and it had to have been 10 feet long, and also the entrance to it was 4 feet off the ground, which I very much doubt like a bear or a cougar would make an entrance like that. Okay, so a perfect example of why I don't really cotton much to photos of Bigfoot, but this is my adolescent friend, and he was up behind my house one day shaking a tree. You can kind of see him poking his face out. See his face right there? Okay, so he was sitting beneath a tree. I was walking in the woods with my husband, and I think he was kind of doing it to sort of challenge my husband, because as I later realized, he was courting me. So I think it was a show of strength to impress me and intimidate my husband. Okay, these are what I think are two of his print in a seep. So there's the heel, and there's the dirt from the ridge, and the toes are up here. It's not a great picture. I have a much better picture of a print, which I'll show you. Okay, this is just more leaning of branches. This X appeared overnight right behind my house. Oh, and the biggest coop in recorded history. Okay, so I sent this photo to a Sasquatch research expert. I just made the assumption. Now, my foot is a size 8.5. Let's ask AI how many inches is a size 8.5 foot. Let's see if I can find out. Might not be able to, but let me find out. Hang on. Okay. How many inches is a size 8.5 foot?
8 feet 6 inches
No.
is 102 inches.
I didn't say that right. How many inches is size 8.5 shoe size? Try it again. How many inches is a size 8.5 shoe? Okay, so 9.6. So essentially 10 inches long. Okay, so this crap is 10 inches by 10 inches. Okay, so 10 inches by 10 inches, and as you can see, like, I don't know how often any of you have seen bear poop, but it's usually 100% berries. Okay, and just look at the formation. I mean, this totally looks like a human being's poop. And I literally, when I just took a picture of it because I thought it was the biggest bear poop and the biggest bear in the world, and I sent it to a Sasquatch expert, and he was like, no ma'am, you've got a picture there of a healthy Sasquatch poo. So there you go. That picture was taken where I told you the other family moved to a logging trail that I walked to a lot. Okay, so here's something interesting that particular family did. They took downed trees and they set them up along this logging road at about every 30 to 50 feet. There was one of these, and most of them were sitting over here, like on this hillside, and the tops were woven into the canopy above. But this one in particular happened to be sitting on the road, so it was really obvious. And they did this right at the bottom of the hillside on the mountain, where I'm 90.99% positive that they live. So here is the base of the tree sitting on the road, and as you can clearly see, broken off, and just like it just been like it was sat down so hard that it made it splay out at the bottom. Also, this was broken off and such. So that was very interesting, and those things were in place for about a year, and then we got this horrible ice storm, and everything just got messed up back there, and all the sign kind of got obliterated. Here's a cross in the same area that has been there for a really long time. This could be natural, but it seems fairly pointed to me. This X also seemed constructed to me, as well as this one constructed. This was taken right outside my back door, and I believe this is a knuckle print, a right-handed knuckle print. I think this is where the thumb got bent under, and I think this is like the top of the knuckle. I could be wrong, but I don't know what's going on here. I mean, this kind of looks like toes, doesn't it? It was just unusual to me, but it was pretty close to this footprint that I got. And this was the footprint left by the female who had the baby on our property. And the reason I know this is because it was right next to the table with the Scrabble tiles on it, and it appeared the night she wrote her name with the Scrabble tiles, which I heard from my bedroom. I could have peeked on her, I could have spied on her, but it felt so disrespectful. I didn't do it. I feel like sometimes I kick myself for not going out to look at her while she was doing it. But again, we had this, like, I had this mind connection with her, and I didn't want to offend her. Okay, so there are a few of the photos, that may or may not prove anything, but what it all comes down to, people, is that there's no question that these people are real, and that they have many different tribes and they live worldwide, and the governments of the world would rather not us know that they're alive, because if it's proven that they're alive, then they'll need to be given rights, and their habitats will need to be protected. And I don't think the governments of the world want to give up their logging territories, and a lot of, the lands that they live on have natural resources. So, it's a big old can of big hairy worms to open. And I don't think the governments, they don't want to have to deal with all of that. Thus, this long-standing smear campaign to try to make us believe that these indigenous peoples all around the world are not real, when there's literally thousands of first-hand reports here on YouTube alone. So y'all make up your own mind. My mind has been made up for me. But what I would encourage you to do is, if you interact with these people, and if you know where they live, don't tell anybody where they are. Don't lead law enforcement to them. Live and let live. They're out there trying to live their own lives, and they're not, for the most part, they're not trying to interact with us until we come into their territory. So if you're going to go out there camping or hunting, realize you're in their territory and be respectful to them. If you go out, bring a gift. Leave a gift for them. Speak to them when you enter the forest and when you enter their habitats, and clean up after yourselves and behave respectfully when you're out there in the wilderness, not only because the wilderness itself deserves your respect, but these people deserve your respect. They deserve to be left alone and not molested by humans, and the more we leave them alone, the more they're going to leave us alone. If you're a person that's had an aggressive encounter, I'm very sorry for that. But again, these are people defending their territory, just like we humans do. And if you don't believe me, go to your local news source and read your newspaper and think about what's happening in the world today, and tell me that humans aren't aggressive, territorial, Homo sapien animals on this planet. Alright, so he who casts the first stone type thing, think about it. Be respectful to these people, leave them alone, and let them live their best lives. A little prayer for the forest people, that they may be protected, and that they may be allowed to live out there in the wilderness and live their lives and not be interfered with by humans. That is my greatest wish for them. Okay, guys, well, thank you for being here today for the cryptid portion of the program. Tune in next time for who knows what, more Incogweirdness, and maybe some more Tarot Incogweirdo. If you have any stories that you would like for me to share here on the channel regarding the forest people, that would be awesome. Or any subject of the strange, unusual, and paranormal, you can write it in the comments or send it to me at terraincogweirdo@gmail.com. Same goes for any questions you might want to put to my cards. I only take questions about the strange and unusual and missing persons and such, and famous stories, famous, strange, and unusual stories for Tarot Incogweirdo. Alright, well, that's gonna be it for me today. Thanks for joining me, and we'll see you next time here on Terra Incogweirdo, the land where para is normal. So long, go fall, my friends. May you have a blessedly hairy day. Bye.